Hello and welcome everyone to our 10th episode of Drip by Drip Unveiling Fashion's Thirsty Truth. Today we're going to discuss the case of Ethiopia, a country that is obviously very strong in textiles. And we have a fantastic guest here with us today, Tsion Bahru, who is a social entrepreneur, but also a fashion designer. And I will give the word to you to introduce yourself. Hey,
All
Tsion.
right. Thank you guys so much for having me. My name is Tsion. I'm from Ethiopia, and I'm a fashion designer and entrepreneur. I mainly have two missions, and that's sustainable fashion and social impact. So through my fashion brand, MISS.T.CAL, what we basically do is offer custom exclusive pieces that celebrate Ethiopian heritage, and that are, ethically produced. And so we have like authentic pieces that are unique and exclusive to our target market. And through my sub-brand, which is also under my company, MISS.T.CAL Apparel Design, we have Lily reusable pads. And through Lily pads, what we try to do is give access to women and girls all over Ethiopia, but mainly in rural areas, access to menstrual hygiene products. And we have donation campaigns that run on this. And we personally go and deliver these donations to these girls. And it's not just about products. We really teach them how to use these products that we manufacture ourselves. And, we talk about the social aspect behind menstruation in Ethiopia, which has like a lot of, negative things around it. And then we also just show them how to really take care of their menstrual hygiene health. So basically, that's what I do.
Sounds fantastic, especially about the second business of yours, but also the fashion label. We will also talk a bit later. For the beginning, I would like to ask a question that our former guest from the last episode, Sana, from our partner organization in Pakistan, left us with, because at each end of an episode, we ask the guest we're talking to about raising a question for the next guest. So the guest question that Sana had for you was, since there is a big shift globally now with fashion production becoming more sustainable and consumers being more aware of sustainability aspects and making better choices, how do you think the fashion industry globally will evolve over the next couple of years? Because sustainability, as we all know, comes at a price. It's not cheap, and it takes more effort. So how do you think that the landscape of fashion will change in the next years?
Well, basically, I think like the future of fashion is going to be like, it's going to be shifting from mass production to mindful consumption, right? And consumers are going to be defining this industry because consumers now, they're demanding information, they're demanding like transparency. They want to know how their products are made, who is it made by, and under what conditions are these clothes made. So like you have like a sort of rise of like thrift shops, even in Ethiopia, especially in Kenya, that I've seen. And, like upcycled products are also becoming like popular. So like consumers are defining this situation, but also like generally sustainable production, I feel, is going to force fashion to slow down, because manufacturers are also like shifting towards raw materials that are like biodegradable. And then there are ethical practices that like they're forced to be taken into consideration, whether it's like labor laws, whether it's this like something that you guys also work on, water waste management and general environmental concerns. So this kind of sustainable production processes are going to basically force fashion to slow down, which is happening globally. As for the cost, obviously, like sustainable production is costly. It's not cheap. But I feel like just like all the other industries, like even in agriculture, through time, through technology and innovation, like these costs are going to be reduced, like waterless dyeing, for example, in closed loop recycling, etc. There's like new developments all the time. And as we know, science is always evolving and changing. So I feel like through these innovations, we can really reduce costs, but it might take time, but we're shifting towards that as a global thing,
Yeah, sounds like a very positive outlook for the industry, actually. Much more positive than I think many people in the industry are right now. So I'm very hopeful.
Yeah, for sure.
Great.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. I hope that will happen, actually. So since you mentioned...
I think it will. I really think so. It's happening already, isn't it?
It is. I think it's just the perspective that I have in Europe right now is that it is changing in certain areas of the world. But I see that the consumption habits in Europe are not changing for the better, but changing for the worse, because the economic situation is getting more dire. There's more financial stress on people because inflation and housing is becoming very expensive. Food is becoming very expensive, while the income levels in Europe are not rising equally. So we see that people are shifting away a bit more from buying sustainable fashion, which is a bit more pricey, and going back to consuming more fast fashion, which is cheaper. So this is maybe why I'm a bit more negative, but I definitely see all the points that you make. And I really hope that it will come together and become positive in the end.
Let's hope so.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. So since you mentioned, we as an organization are focused on anything that comes with water waste, water pollution, water consumption in the fashion and textile industry. Is there a fact about Ethiopia which is really shocking in terms of water that you can share with us?
Yeah, definitely. You know, like Ethiopia, like we're so rich in nature and we're like abundance in water. And that's what we're working towards, the building the dam and stuff, which is almost completed. But like, despite all of this richness that we have, like only 42% of our population, like about 42% of our population has access to clean water, like drinking water. Mm-hmm. And I read somewhere also that like 80% of diseases in Ethiopia, like, is caused because of this issue. And it's so sad, you know, because like with all the richness, you know, you have all these things, but if you don't have good management, it's still not going to be like working towards your favor. So this is my biggest shock personally.
Yeah, I understand. 80% is definitely a shocking fact. If 80% of the illnesses come from waterborne diseases or something, then that's crazy.
Yeah, because a lot of like, you know, our population in Addis Ababa, like the 80+% of the population does not live in Addis. You know, it's in rural areas. And those areas are not really developed like Addis Ababa. Here we see the shiny lights in the streets, but this is not the entirety of Ethiopia. So there's a lot of issue towards that, and the climate change also. And women are also like, are the main people that are responsible for collecting water. Mm-hmm. So the more drought you have, the more you have these girls and women in rural areas that they have to travel so much, like long roads to collect water. Then they miss schools. Mm-hmm. It's so much social impact too that happens like in a negative way.
Such a vicious cycle, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which we can see globally. Yeah, since Ethiopia is also very strong in terms of leather production. So this is what Ethiopia, I think most people know for. Obviously coffee, amazing coffee, but also leather production. And leather production generally, tanneries come with a price in terms of water, because usually they cause a lot of very strong chemical effluents. And in many countries, those are untreated and released back into the natural water resources. Can you share about the ecological impact of the leather production and the leather industry in Ethiopia? Does it have a very negative impact on the water resources, or is there like a good system of how those effluents are being treated in place?
So like, you know, there's always like environmental enforcement and laws and stuff like that, mm-hmm. right? I mean, not enforcement, sorry. There's laws. There's always written laws, but there's no reinforcement. Mm-hmm. It goes back to the whole mismanagement stuff. So just like you said, like that's one of our biggest exports as well. It used to be much, much bigger before, I suppose. And it's water intensive production. So we don't have like these closed loop water recycling systems, and dumping untreated wastewater in rivers is really common. And this also messes, with a lot of the community's health, whether it's skin disease, cancer, organ damage, and stuff like that happens. So
Yeah.
I think we're a bit more focused on the money rather than like afterwards, like what's going to impact the environment and the people afterwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always laws, but not so much reinforcement.
Yeah, that's actually something we see a lot from, like, we've done a few case studies now before talking about Ethiopia, and it's more or less the same in all the countries that have a really strong textile industry. So unfortunately, that's definitely a global problem. So you have your own label. You are a fashion designer and obviously fashion producer with MISS.T.CAL. How do you manage to stay rooted in the handmade? You mentioned it in the beginning when you introduced yourself. You're doing handmade pieces of like small quantities, I suppose, and all handmade designs. So how do you manage to have that course and to manage to be economically viable as a company with all the competition of like fast fashion and the industry in general? How do you stay, like, how do you keep the business healthy?
Well, like it's not even a comparison. At MISS.T.CAL, we offer something that fast fashion cannot, and that's like authenticity, quality, customization, and sustainability, right? We have like artisanal craftsmanship and customization, and that's a big deal. Like these are not two things that you can compare. You can buy your fast fashion stuff for sure, but you can also come to me and buy that. They're not in competition, I would say. And we also have like sustainability and especially social impact as a selling point. Lily Pads plays a crucial role in people, how they perceive MISS.T.CAL, because it's still under the brand, and how we care about women, and how we are not just about vanity. And then we obviously have our strategic branding, and we are very we're very visible on social media, through storytelling, influencer partnerships, celebrities. We have a brand that's aspirational and yet socially responsible. So we're not in competition with fast fashion. We don't want to be in competition with fast fashion. And these are not, I would say it's not comparable. And in Ethiopia, it's a bit different than in the West, like you said. All the fast fashion stuff that you guys have over there that you refer to as like cheaper, when it's imported and comes here, it's ridiculous price.
Okay.
So people, and then the sizes might not be as much as in Europe, where you can have like small to triple XL. Here you might have a small and medium that comes. So people would rather get something customized by us, and they can choose everything they want. So it's actually working really well in Ethiopia, I would say.
Amazing. It sounds like your company or your fashion label is exactly the kind of future kind of fashion company that you referred to in the beginning, that the industry is hopefully going to shift towards.
I really believe so.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely starting with it, right? Like you're setting an example of what the future can look like and how it's going to work. For sure.
I believe
so. Does, as a designer, when you're choosing materials and all these things, does water play a role for you, or is it not a big factor for you because there's no like big issue in terms of choosing materials in Ethiopia that are like water intensive or not intensive?
Yeah, it's not so much of a big deal, to be honest with you, because like even the way our products, I mean, Ethiopian fabrics are made is not like industry intensive, water polluting and carbon footprints high, where it's not like that. So it doesn't play that much of a big role. But what happens with Lily Pads is we have these great menstrual pads, and we deliver them to rural areas. That's when water kind of becomes a problem. Not so much in my production, but in the consumption of my customers. Because in order for my product to work, you need water to be available and sanitation to be present. So that's the issue that I see a bit for me.
Yeah. So how do you manage these challenges? So like maybe can you explain a bit more about lily pads, like what actually the pads are all about and how the women use them? Because I know they're reusable and you're using
Right.
fabric, as if I understand it correctly, you're using fabric that's left over from the production or the pieces that you do with MISS.T.CAL with the fashion label. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct. That's correct, but halfway is correct.
Okay.
Because like the raw materials that you need to use to make reusable pads are actually different, and there's layers to it.
Yeah.
So the material that we use that's left over, it's for the bottom pieces, not so much the one that's in skin contact. The one that's skin contact. So we use 100% cotton fabrics, PUL, like leak-proof fabrics, absorbent layers, and it's actually certified by Ethiopian Conformity Assessment Enterprise, which is up to standard, hygiene, health certified. And so we make these, and when we give it to our customers or people that we help, they can use it for 2 years. And so you wash and reuse. It's all based on fabric. You wash and reuse. We got 4 pieces in a pack, which is normal for somebody who has regular flow, I would say, menstrual flow.
Yeah, definitely. So why did you see a need for lily pads? Because you started the fashion label first and then you launched lily pads. That's how we found you also.
Right.
So why did you feel like there was a need for some sort of sustainable business that's creating these reusable pads? What's the situation like for women in mainly rural areas in Ethiopia, really, when it comes to managing their menstruation?
Yeah. I mean, how I started the fashion is it goes back to like 2020 when a manufacturer of disposable pads approached me because he liked the way I sell my products. He's like, I need you to help me sell my items too. And he has a big factory, and so I used to work with him as like an agent. So I used to give NGOs like factory prices so that they can go donate. And then I saw a certain shift in what these NGOs wanted. And they weren't interested in our products anymore. And they're like, no, we don't need disposable pads. We need, reusable pads. And I'm like, what are these reusable pads? Like, what's taking over my business? It started that way. And then they started to explain to me like how the disposable pads are not going to work. We can't keep giving them this and that. We need sustainable, and we're spending a lot of money. And so I was like, okay, so I was in Zambia, I think, and I found a girl who makes these. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh, so everything is based on fabric. So that's when I was like, hold on, I actually make this. And with all the craftsmanship, all the corsets and all these like fitted, pieces that we make, I looked at the pad and I'm like, this is so easy.
Yeah.
As long as you have the proper material and that's up to standards and, hygienically like proved to be well for the skin and for your, like vaginal health, let's say. So that's when I went to that. And when I got deeper into it and I started personally going and giving these donations to these people, and I saw the conditions that women in rural areas are living in, because like up to that time, I just hear stories, right? Oh, like in rural areas, like they don't go to school because the usual stuff that we all hear and the research that we read. But when you go and see it, it's a deep issue and it's heartbreaking, and it has like a deep. It touched me deeply.
Yeah,
and it became like something that I actually want to do, to go to these people and meet them, IDP camps especially. There's no way that they can afford disposable pads. There's just no way. And this was like the only solution. And then I saw water is also an issue. And then, so you had to be really targeting where you can actually give them, because you don't want to cause more problems by trying to help.
Yeah.
It's like a never ending issue. Maybe I'll like make water wells too one day.
Yeah, or we cooperate, and we have a partner organization in Ethiopia that we're just like starting to partner with, so they can definitely help you build water wells and filters.
That would be amazing. I think we need them. We need those a lot. But we need to like move it faster. I think it's easy to do it. I don't know why.
Yeah,
It's always
it is pretty easy.
bureaucracies and
Yeah.
stuff, and
Funding, political
yeah,
will. Yeah,
that
definitely
one. And
challenges.
political unrest that kind of makes people shy away from going to these places and doing projects.
Yeah, very true. So we talked about the women and the challenges that they face in terms of menstruation, but are there other challenges that especially textile workers, and I suppose that the workforce in the textile industry in Ethiopia is just like on a global level, mainly women, so mainly female. Are there specific challenges that you know that textile workers in Ethiopia face?
Even from my visits from in like one or two factories, I noticed
Mm-hmm.
like there isn't so much like sanitation in bathrooms, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or there might not be like water and they would have to just like get water within like a little jug or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have your period, these are like issues, there's already the cramps and the emotional distress and
Yes.
everything. And that's also a problem. No running water, the bathrooms are not clean. This is mainly what I've seen for the workers.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, in rural areas, there's bigger issues because you got to travel far, and
Yeah.
that causes a lot of other problems.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, since you talked about the factories, actually, two colleagues of ours from Drip by Drip traveled to
Yeah.
Ethiopia 2 years ago because we heard a lot in the industry from our network that Ethiopia is supposed to become the new Bangladesh. Because in Bangladesh, there are a lot of unions forming, and there's a lot of pressure in terms of pricing and labor costs. So there was this like rumor that Ethiopia is going to be like the next big market where fast fashion companies are going to move to because the labor prices are much lower, and there's a big workforce. So two colleagues of mine traveled to Ethiopia to find out how the water situation is in Ethiopia, and if we maybe can support the fact that effluents are not going to become as big of a problem as they are in Bangladesh right now at the very beginning. So we visited the country, and then we heard that actually, even though industrial parks had been built and that
Yeah.
brands were interested in producing in Ethiopia, that this like big fast fashion production hadn't started yet because of different changes in laws with the US market in terms of import and export, but also other things. And I was wondering, what is the situation now like? Did that change? Did like this big like fast fashion production and exploitation start? Or is it still very low scale?
Well, I feel like it's like a bit complex because, like you said, it was supposed to be the next Bangladesh, and I don't know if that's
Yeah.
something that I like to hear because
Yes,
it
of
implies
course.
a lot of bad things, right? But
Yeah.
like I think at that time there was COVID-19, which slowed down everything first of all, and
Yeah.
then we have like an ongoing problems within our country, political
Mm-hmm.
unrest, instability. And so like you have like global supply chain disruptions that happen because of this, and like foreign investment, like this is a big risk.
Mm-hmm.
If you're investing in millions
Yeah.
and billions and dollars and euros, this is the main thing you look at. So if it's not
Yeah.
safe, like they're not really looking towards that. You mentioned the whole we were kicked out of AGOA, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, and you see like a lot of factories that they were complaining about that, and a lot of them shut down, and a lot of them actually shifted to making like local products.
Ah, great.
Um, yeah, local products in the sense of like it's labeled as if it's coming from foreign countries or whatever,
Ah.
but it's given like to the local market. So they're
Mhm.
not so much exporting, but they're still working in within the local market. I definitely think the progress has slowed down. I don't think we moved
Mhm.
up from that time, and
Yeah.
there's been a lot of changes. But for me, when I see these things and I see these big factories with like 5,000 square meter area and they have machinery.
A lot of these factories, they were like devastated that they couldn't, the AGOA was not going on anymore. But I think as a business person, it's crazy to rely on one contract, you know, like, what are you doing? Like, you know, like you have all these machineries, all these employees, and you're going to risk everything relying on one thing. I don't know. Like, I think like you need to be able to move quick and shift, because politics and national things would be really affecting you when you're at that level of a company, I would say. And then now it's just, we're talking about BRICS, and, you know, I would have dealt with the Chinese in the beginning, or something like that. But I understand how they're also going. They perhaps they don't move like entrepreneurs. Perhaps they move like, you know, you get a big space, you do the same product, and that's that. Maybe they don't think like creatively. And
yeah,
I'm hoping that was a good lesson for them, and it kind of moves them, you know, to be a bit more versatile, a bit more quick. Stuff happens in life, and you can't just put all your eggs in one basket, I would say.
Yeah, very true. And since your business model is completely different from them, do those political challenges that Ethiopia has been facing in the last years, how do they impact your two companies? Do you see any negative impacts, or since you're like a local entrepreneur, it works nonetheless?
Yeah, I was talking about a textile manufacturer like last time too. He was saying to me, you know, we get hurt when there's national stuff, and people like you guys, you know, you guys evolve. So the smaller you are, stuff like this actually makes it bigger, because, you know, global stuff ends. You can't really import stuff, or importing clothes is becoming luxury. So what do people do? They come to me. Whereas like the big importers are hurting, and the big exporters are hurting. And so I think it works in our favor. But for lily pads and our distribution, that's messy. That's so messy, because we can't travel how we want. Well, you know, at the same time, if there's conflict, people are also willing to help and donate more of these pads on one side. But on the other side, it makes our distribution just impossible, because we can't move around how we want. And I'm not so much into just sending my products, and I don't like that. So it has like, you know, nice. The both good and bad.
Yeah. Yeah. A good side of the coin and a bad side of the coin, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
The usual.
So, yeah, exactly. Definitely. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, with BRICS and like countries that are not like the usual Western power countries rising in power, and this like whole global shift of global north and south and power imbalances, how do you feel that's going to impact Ethiopia? And do you think this is something positive that's happening right now?
Again, like two sides of the same coin. You have the good and the bad. You know, like when you do big stuff like this, and when you're joining platforms and programs like the BRICS, you know, you're going to have more job creation. So you're going to give opportunity to a lot more people. There's going to be more industrial parks and working places. So that's a good thing for people that are going to be employed. And we have a lot of unemployment in Ethiopia, you know. Export potential is going to rise up for sure. But I hope while this is happening, we don't really take the same road that everybody has been taking. That's why I'm not so much for the Bangladesh. And like, because this is an opportunity for us to be like leaders in sustainability if we're smart about it. And if we have like good management, we can really shift the narrative and be like, oh, you know, you can also do it this way, right? At the same time, the bad side would be, okay, you create job creation, you have job creations and people are going to be employed, but at what wage, and are they going to be exploited? And how, like, maybe they're desperate, so they will just work for like really, really minimum wages. Something that would concern you guys is that more production would be more water depletion, you know?
Yeah.
So we're probably going to deal with that, most likely, I would say. And then maybe if we're getting into this mass production thing, we might also have a problem with like, you know, the cultural, like the cultural dilution, perhaps, you know, because of how unique our textiles are and how we make them. And that's a big thing. And maybe those types of things might start to disappear. Maybe.
Yeah.
This is hypothetical. I'm not sure. So,
yeah. What do you think would have to be done in Ethiopia in order to prevent all those negative things that come with like a bigger industry or bigger textile industry that come along with them, to prevent those from happening and to become a leader in sustainability instead? Like, what would need to be done in Ethiopia to reach that goal?
Having laws is always like there. Like I said earlier too, reinforcing it. You know what I mean? Like reinforcing the production steps and ethical processes, eco-friendly production, and reinforcing like labor laws, reinforcing environmental laws. It's all about management, right? And then hopefully we're not going to have so much corruption to where these laws are just going to be pushed under the table because some big dog wants to make more money, So if we have like good laws that are going to be reinformed, I feel it can work. But it's so hard for me to be like, yeah, that's going to happen. And
yeah, obviously. It's the same for everyone, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because manufacturers and producers are not going to do this on their own. Not everybody's going to care,
Unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So we're almost done with the time that we plan to take for this episode. And there are two more questions. The first one, I actually, now that I talked to you for a while, I think I know your answer, but I'm going to ask it nonetheless because I asked it all the other guests in the last episodes. And that's, we, in this global world of fashion and textile production, we produce way too many clothes, and we already have enough for every person on this planet and every person that's going to be born to be dressed fully. Still, though, we do continue to produce and consume. What do you think would happen if from one day to the other, the whole world would stop buying new clothes? Would the impact on Ethiopia be a positive or a negative one?
I mean, like in reality, it can't happen. So it's not very realistic, I would say.
It's utopian, I agree.
But also, I mean, yeah, we would have the reduction in all these environmental problems that we have, etc. But there will be a lot of people out of business, out of work. Like me too. So yes, there's going to be a reduction in, so many things, but I think it's better to slow it instead of just making it disappear, I would say. And by slowing it down, because it's a global thing, right? You can't even just fight it on a local level. So when you like slow things down, and as a whole global nation, I would say a global nation, if we have a global nation and everybody does their part, we can reduce so many problems.
True.
But as for just stopping it, I don't know. I don't think I like that idea.
Yeah, I expected that reply. Of course, and I have to say, Tsion, all the other guests I talked to from Bangladesh, Kenya, Pakistan, all of them gave me the same reply. They all said, even though we're facing a lot of challenges within the fashion and textile industry in our country, but we wouldn't want the whole industry to just stop, because still it's providing jobs and it's a passion of people who like to design and craft clothes and not just like produce them, on a minutes basis. So yeah, I think this is something that you definitely all agree
upon. And then
upon.
fashion would disappear. Imagine, like, we won't have any new things coming out then.
Yeah.
Whereas like creativity and self-expression would disappear. That's going to be a problem.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. So, Tsion, our last question is what we started this interview with. That would be, what is your question for our next guest? The next guest is not certainly set yet, but it will definitely be someone from a different country. So another case study. So do you have a question I can take with me for our next guest?
I can ask because I want to know like how to industrialize traditional and artisanal craftsmanship as well for Ethiopia. Like, and I think maybe Southeast Asia is good at this. How can like traditional textile techniques in Southeast Asia inspire global sustainable fashion trends? I would like to know that.
Amazing question. Okay, I'm already looking forward to asking that.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I think it's something we can all like aspire to listen to the answer for this.
Yes. Sounds fantastic. And that's the perfect closure wording for this episode. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate you inviting me.
Yes, definitely. And for sharing your expertise, your thoughts with us. I really appreciate the time you took. Thank you so much, Tsion. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you guys as well. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.